Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for tuning in to this session of our UMAC Zoom In new projects. My name is Andrew Simpson. I'm one of UMAC's vice presidents, and today we're going to be looking at another one of the exciting new projects in higher education. UMAC, as you know, is the ICOM's International Committee for University Museums and Collections. And so far in this series, we've had a look at a couple of interesting projects. I think there's 3 projects we've looked at in the series so far. And today we're going to look at a project in Australia. And it is the development of the Chau Chak Wing Museum at Sydney University. And so this is the first Australian project we've dealt with. And it's a fairly exciting one, a fairly significant one. And I'd like to introduce you to the director of the Chau Chak Wing Museum and also the director of cultural engagement at Sydney University, David Ellis. Hi there, David. How are you?
Very well, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here to introduce this exciting new museum. It's been quite a journey over the past 15 years as we developed our ideas around the collections. But perhaps I could start by just giving you an introduction to the University of Sydney.
I think that'll be terrific. Yep.
Good. It's Australia's oldest university, Australia's first university, established in 1850. Within 10 years of its establishment, the provost, Sir Charles Nicholson, started to collect collections of antiquities, Mediterranean world antiquities, to establish the first university museum in Australia, which later became known as the Nicholson Museum. That was a collection of antiquities. Now we currently have about 450,000 items that cover everything from natural history, ethnography, history of science, visual arts, a broad range of subject areas that were spread over 3 separate museums. Within 20 years of the establishment of the University of Sydney, discussions were held with one of the prominent families in Sydney, the Macleay family, and the university acquired its second major collection, a collection of ethnography and natural history based on Sir Alexander Macleay's cabinets of entomology. These were established in the late 18th century by Sir Alexander Macleay, brought out to Sydney in 1820s and gifted to the university in the 1870s. So the university museums had a very strong establishment of working with collections in its formative years. I joined the university in 2003 because the museums were operating as 3 separate entities. None of them were really fit for purpose. But let me start the slideshow, and that will all make sense. So when I joined in 2003, the university's collections, antiquities, visual arts, natural history, ethnography of science, ethnography and the history of science were spread out over 3 areas, 3 administrative areas, 3 separate museums. None of them were really fit for purpose. The Macleay Museum was in the attic of its original purpose-built building as teaching needs took over. The art gallery was in what I called the smallest art gallery in Australia at only 70 square meters, yet over 8,000 works. So a number of things needed to change. There was a purpose behind my appointment that one of my tasks was to bring together the collections administratively, to get curators really talking to one another and look at the possibilities of how we can rethink what we do with those collections. We had at that time about 10 full-time equivalent staff made up of mainly curators. So one of the first tasks I brought in was collection management regime. specialist collection managers, conservators, and so on to really work across all our collections. But it quickly emerged that of the possibilities of bringing them all together in a multidisciplinary way, not keeping them as three separate entities. And within a few years of my starting, about 15 years ago, I started to imagine what these collections could do and be if they all came together. For a start, we would solve all our problems, or many of our problems of access. We would be able to share administration, would be able to share collection management skills. But the university at that time didn't have an appetite to suddenly come up with all the funds for either an adaptive reuse or a new build. So one of my major tasks to begin with was really coming up with a vision and socializing that vision across the university. And I have to say, at first, people said, look, nice idea, but go away. One of the impediments was we hadn't collected the data. When I arrived, we didn't really know how many visitors the collections were getting. We didn't know all the use in teaching. It wasn't documented. So one of the first things we did was create a whole lot of data sets of use in research, use in teaching, the value of the collections, the monetary value of the collections. I found that very useful to get additional resources to enable an audit regime, and that added staff to our collection management team. It was very, very, very useful. And I know some museums shy away from that. I actually embraced it.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I'm guessing that if you're in a university where for traditionally that the separate museums had operated separately and within their own sort of smaller administrative subsections of the university, if you like, there probably would not have been any need to collect data on things like, number of visitors and number of, uses of the collection in research and teaching and things like that. But to sort of win an argument with the leadership of the university, that data would have been fairly essential.
Show us the evidence was the message.
Yeah.
Nice idea, but show us the evidence of use. And one of the great, after starting to populate it, and I think one of my first publications was what I look back on as a rather naive business case that needed a lot of strengthening over time. And the data collection was essentially that. It also enabled me to go out and start to talk to people about it. In other words, socializing the idea. There's nothing like having a prominent person of the arts community tap the Vice Chancellor on the shoulder and say, I heard an interesting proposal the other week from David Ellis, and that's how it worked. So people outside then informed our senior management, our senior executive team, that there is something in this idea of bringing the collections together.
Yep, terrific.
But that was a 15-year process. But first, let me take you through the end result, and perhaps then we could chat about that.
Yep, that'd be great.
Process. So there's a great diversity of collections, and the new museum really showed the possibility of how these collections can connect in discussions of materiality, in discussions of ethics, and so on, and different ways of viewing the world. And this is where we did it. This is the new Chau Chak Museum, right at the ceremonial centre of the university, right at the entrance to the university and the main quadrangle, right on the edge of the city, right on the edge of Sydney.
That's spectacular.
It's downtown Sydney. Yeah, it's a great location. The trees surrounding it, the block. It was a greenfield site when we were told we had that site, but the trees could not be touched. They're heritage trees, 1919 memorial World War I plant. But the building now nestles beautifully in that canopy of trees. It's an uncompromising modernist building. The architects really did a fine job. They had experience in museums. Sydney-based architects had experience in museums and really listened to the brief. So it's been called a concrete box. However, when you're inside, it really opens up. So here you can see that uncompromising modernist architecture juxtaposed with the university's original quadrangle buildings built between 1850 and 1870.
Yep, that's an interesting contrast. Okay,
It really is. It really is. We didn't want pastiche. We didn't want to really.
Yeah.
The architects did reference some of the sandstone colouring in the lower levels of the museum, but we wanted it to be a museum of the 21st century.
Yep.
So there's a profile. It's over 5 levels. The museum itself is 8,000 square metres. 2,000 square metres are exhibition space. And on top of that, there is circulation space, teaching spaces, collection storage is the lower level. But it's a very, and in the center, there's a grid that allows natural light to penetrate through the circulation zones of the museum.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that central circulation zone with stairs up. Before the installation of the collections.
Yep.
So the museum opened in November last year amidst COVID in Sydney. Not the easiest of openings, but there we have it. There's on the entry level, one level up to temporary exhibition galleries right at the end. The major temporary exhibition gallery is 450 square metres with 7-metre high ceilings. So it's a nice voluminous space.
Yeah. The
total museum at 8,000 square metres is really a good size for us. You know, I think if you ask any director, they'd always say, oh, we want more. But we've added 10 new positions to the university's museum team. I think that's probably the limit for now. So it's brought us up to about 32 full-time equivalent staff.
That's terrific.
So you can start to see that this is just following the opening, in the first few days of opening, our first lot of visitors, and starting to see how the visitors use the museum and the transparency of it. You can look from from the entry point, you can look right through to the city. It's a very transparent building, yet a number of galleries have no natural light. Looking at the nature of our materials, works on paper, we want to really reduce light impacting those galleries.
Yep.
An auditorium, beautiful, different feel, very wooded feel, looking out on the gardens. It seats about 130 people, or it will post-COVID for us, and is being much used in the first few months of opening. And all important, of course, is the collection storage. Previously, we had collections spread out over 7 locations. None of them really fit for purpose. This storage facility finally gave us that state-of-the-art storage in which to hold the art collections, ethnography, the antiquities collections. The natural history collections are still kept in a separate area of the university, mainly through because of the naphthalene and the air conditioning and so on required for storing those sort of collections. And we're still working on improving storage conditions for the natural history collections. There are still challenges ahead, but we've solved many of our of the former problems. So this enables, for example, our art collection staff for the first time to see sets of works on one screen. It really enables good research access to those collections. This is the temporary exhibition gallery. I was just describing it. It opened with a splendid exhibition of the art of the Yolngu people of northeast Arnhem Land.
Yeah, that was a fantastic exhibition.
People. Yeah, had a really lovely catalogue called Jalkari.
Yep, and won an award too, didn't it, David?
Yeah, it won an award of how we worked with First Nations peoples, the Yolngu people.
Yep, terrific.
It really surveyed the university's 100 years of working with communities, and that's expressed through the artworks. It was the first time that we'd worked with communities that were co-curators and co-designers. So the materials and colours were determined by elders and artists from those communities.
Yeah, fantastic.
The ancient Egyptian collection wasn't ignored at all. In fact, it's one of our most popular galleries. The collection was largely brought together by Sir Charles Nicholson in the 1850s and 1860s, and then through the university's subscription to the Egyptian Exploration Fund in the 1890s and early part of the 20th century. This is really showing the Egyptian mummies, but from a university perspective of gleaning knowledge from those mummies through the latest scanning techniques, and that's why the use of the digital screens. The screen on the right shows the recolorization of the wooden mummy coffin.
Mm-hmm.
Contemporary art. We've got a gallery dedicated to contemporary artists responding to collections. And this is an installation by Indigenous artist Daniel Boyd. We'll be changing over every 3 or 4 months installations in this gallery. We've repurposed 19th century cabinets into as part of the display fabric. This exhibition, Object Art Specimen, really interrogates how one item can be viewed simply as an object, as an art object, as a specimen for study, and all those different connections between objects and collections are really explored here.
That's really, really interesting from a university point of view too, because I guess that shows the linkages that the same object can have through a range of different study disciplines, both scientific and humanities.
Yeah, this exhibition was put together through a few big themes: love, sex, and death, for example, deep time, order and chaos, and just shows you how no matter what the subject, the collections can be interrogated and incorporated into these sort of subjects.
Yep, terrific.
Students especially have found this pretty engaging, and they debate, why something is included and what it means and what are the connections. So it really depends. So depending on your age and your background, your family background, and so on, you'll create different narratives in this exhibition. Part of the antiquities collections, the use of natural light and sculpture works particularly well here.
Yeah.
And one of the main drivers was getting the new project up and running was really the opportunities that object-based learning would give the students at the University of Sydney. And I have to say it's been an outstanding success. We've had over 13,000 students use these classes in the first 6 months since opening. And this is right across all disciplines. So it's not just fine arts or visual arts students looking at visual arts and paintings and so on.
Yeah.
But it's the business school interrogating.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's impacting all areas of the university's curriculum.
It is. It's been a welcome surprise, actually, just how virtually every school and faculty of the university have somehow connected and wanted their students to participate in these classes. And the students themselves find it really engaging. It gets them out of what they would normally expect to be doing. And this has also been carried forward during the COVID shutdowns in Sydney. Zoom object-based learning has also been very popular, and it keeps going, it keeps moving forward. So it really has been a transformational project. It's increased the university use of the collections and the profile. It's increased the numbers of visitors, including university students. Now that can be a very difficult group to get through as just plain visitors. It's increased the object-based learning classes and use of the collections. Research inquiries and partnerships have gone up. I get offered every week, I think, would you like to receive as a gift certain objects? Most of them we say, look, not one for us, but certainly the level of donations has gone up. That figure is a little out of date. We've had about, when Sydney shut down again at the end of June, we had about 80,000 visitors since opening.
Yep.
Really pleasingly, the average length of visit is more than 2 hours. Now, that is quite pleasing to me, and we've got a cafe that helps you recharge. But I've had people that I've known that have spent almost the day in the museum. There's been a lot of reading. People are reading the extended labels and so on, which did surprise me a little. It was a welcome surprise.
I think that sort of average length of visit really tells you that what you've developed is a significant cultural destination. It's the kind of place where people can commit a large part of the day to visiting, because there's so much richness there in terms of the material and the information on display.
Indeed. The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Everything from the Indigenous communities we've worked with from Northeast Arnhem are delighted. We were hoping to have them down for the opening, but that wasn't to be. We'll follow up with a later date on that. But we still have some challenges ahead of us. One of my main challenges is to ensure the ongoing sustainability of the museum, the financial sustainability of the museum and its programs. Museums are not cheap entities to run. So I'm out there still engaging with potential benefactors. Our staff are looking at various grants, all the usual strategies to get funding for particular programs. And of course, as the university changes or rejigs its priorities and strategies, we have to react to that as well to keep ourselves current and relevant in the eyes of the university executive, in the eyes of students. Just looking at the changes in the way we curate and engage with communities, we need to continue to think about how we are going to engage in future
Yep.
students, future communities.
Yeah, fantastic. That's
So I'll just stop sharing there.
right.
And
Yeah, that's terrific, David. I think that was a really interesting presentation, in as much as it gave a really good sense of the comprehensive scope of what's actually been achieved. And at the beginning there, you outlined it was a 15-year journey, if you like, from original inception of the ideas, I guess, through to bringing it all together. Could you possibly maybe share with us a little bit on, 15 years is a long time, but there are, of course, a lot of people who you have to convince that this is a good and positive thing to do. During those 15 years, when you initially started collecting data about things like visitation levels and things like that, did that sort of change through time from the early times, the early stages of the establishment of the museum service, if you like, through to being on the verge of actually winning the financial support for the new build?
certainly, when I arrived, as I said, there wasn't much data, but there were also very low numbers of visitors. The art gallery was only open 3 days a week, and it was closed December through to February. Go figure.
Yep.
The clay was up, in a very hard to reach location. The Nicholson Museum of Antiquities was, all the interpretation was really minimal. There was a previous attitude that people who entered that museum were expected to know what they were looking at.
It's not unusual, not unusual in a university to have that. Yep.
I think the big change was saying, well, let's think about our external audiences. Let's throw open the doors. Let's extend the opening hours.
Yeah.
And let's not create barriers. Let's make or dumb down, but let's explain things, to adults who are highly intelligent but might not really understand what a bell crater from a South Italian Greek province is. And so we started to change over exhibitions more. In other words, it was a slow build-up of visitation.
Yeah. Yep.
And when we started to produce that in graph form, the line was going up.
Yeah.
Visitation was 10,000 in 2003. Within 10 years, it was close to 100,000.
That's fantastic. I mean, that in itself is a fairly compelling piece of data that would show, a university leader that, well, it's only going in one direction here. There's got to be some potential in terms of using all this material creatively to connect with external audiences. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a powerful bit of data, but also the research data. There were academics using the collections. We just weren't documenting it. We just weren't telling that story. In the early days of the formation, I think the 15 years served us well because we could refine a lot of our ideas.
Yep.
And they did change over time. They did change subtly over time, but really in good ways about how we would bring the collections together, how we would, we had to socialize the idea with curators themselves.
Yes.
Of course, our subject specialists, very passionate members of staff. And it had to be said, a few were a little dubious, others embraced it. So that took time. But basically it was, I can flippantly say 15 years of cocktail parties and going to every exhibition opening, where the cultural influences of the city of Sydney would congregate, and
Right.
really, bang on about, the possibilities and the extraordinary collections
Yep.
at the university, and the possibilities for the future.
Yeah.
And that took time.
I
That took
guess,
time.
yeah, I guess that the other thing that came through very clearly too is the fact that what's essentially you've managed to do is kind of lift the collections out of their original disciplinary boundaries, if you like, and put them into a new institution-wide context. And I can imagine how there would be both, say, researchers, university teachers who would therefore be challenged to perhaps rethink their practices in terms of their research practice and even their teaching practices. But once they've done so, it actually is broadening them out and it's giving them new sort of areas to explore. So I think that convincing those two university communities would have been part of that 15-year socialisation
Indeed, a lot of
process.
our curators, during the building and design stage, we had various consultative groups, and one of them was our researchers and our academics, and those that were really previously using the collections and those that wanted to use them in the future. Change is always challenging for some people, and it took time to really socialize the idea that we're not going to just throw the doors open to what will just be a publicly focused museum. It will still have its university roots in teaching and research. And that was made very, very clear. I think having academics in the room together from different disciplines was actually very useful, because after a bit of time and trust was built, ideas really started to be thrown around.
Yep.
And that really helped our curators look at also the possibilities. It worked quite well.
That's fantastic. I think that well, from what I know, this is the only example of a kind of a convergence of museum activity into a new build that I'm certainly aware of in Australia, and I think it probably is the same in around the world. I mean, there are examples recently like the University of Ghent, but the Ghent, they have a specific sort of scientific focus and a specific agenda in terms of the way they engage with their communities here. But whereas at Sydney, it seems what you've managed to achieve is a new way of using the collections, and actually a new way of the university considering the value of the collections and applying those collections to the business of the university. And that to me seems like quite a significant achievement in terms of changing the whole work culture of the university, if you like, and also changing how the university interacts with external communities. I think that's a fair enough summation.
Yeah, in the words of our senior Deputy Vice Chancellor, it has exceeded his expectations.
Terrific.
Yeah, I really like that one. And he was, he's from a social sciences background. He's a historian. He really got museums, but it really did exceed. And that was the multidisciplinary approach that we've taken. For example, naturally, the entomology cabinets of Sir Alexander Macleay are very much a social history document, a collection, as much as a science collection. And they can be interrogated from all those different perspectives. The trade of insects, the trade of natural history across the Pacific was an ARC project, and we were a partner in that.
Yeah, that's right. The way you've incorporated the some of the old cabinets into the new display there means that you're also sort of conveying a kind of an institutional narrative in as much as you're saying that, you know, well, this is a university that has some considerable history in the European traditions, and this is how collections were developed, and this is how collections were studied and used in the past. So it's interesting that the development has captured a lot of that, the sort of history that's specifically relevant to Sydney University.
Yeah. It's really there's a narrative that flows through a lot of the exhibitions. You know, we don't shy away from telling the stories of provenance and so on, and how things and how things were acquired, why they were acquired, and a lot of the collections have their basis in the history of teaching of the university. But then they carry on a new life now. You know, the filter of time. You know, we have a new perspective on these collections.
Yep, terrific. That's really good. Of course, I guess the other thing that we really should spend a bit of time on briefly is that the fact that a lot of this, you know, new fabulous building development was based on philanthropy too. So maybe if you tell us something about the financing of the whole show, because there'll be people listening to this who aren't familiar with the story, but a mixture of both institutional finance and philanthropic finance.
The new build was a $66.2 million project. That's Australian dollars. We raised 1/3 of that. And when we raised that 1/3, the university put into 2/3. Now, in Australian terms, you know, to raise for capital works is quite difficult from the private sector. We raised 23 million from 5 benefactors. So we didn't actually have a big fundraising campaign. Our method, we've got a very skilled development office. In fact, when I started all of this, the director of development said, I know you think your day job is running the museum. If we're going to do this, meaning go out there and really try and raise the funds, that'll become your day job. Do you agree?
and was this supposition right?
Absolutely. This is where all my focus was.
Yeah.
From probably from 2008 to about 2015, when we secured all the funding we needed, and we then got the green light from our Senate, our governing body, to proceed with the detailed planning and the build itself. So we raised 23 million. It was a classic quiet fundraise, in other words, silent fundraise. We tapped a number of people on the shoulder that we've had previous conversations. We secured the main donation of 15 million from Australian Chinese businessman and philanthropist, Dr. Chau Chak. And in that tradition of naming buildings, museums after prominent benefactors, because it was a very new concept of the way we brought these collections together, we thought it was appropriate to actually name, to create a different name. We still, I might add, reference the history of collections through named galleries within the museum. So there's the Nicholson galleries, the Macleay galleries. Mm-hmm. But following that 15 million donation, that then enabled a few other donors who had notionally committed smaller amounts, but no less significant amounts, to say, yep, okay, I can see it's now going to happen. Count me in.
Yep.
So we never had really a fundraising campaign, but they were really one-on-one chats.
Yeah, it was strategic and well thought out in terms of how you go about it. That's really great. I think,
But that means I had to, but before that, I had to socialize that then with the director
yes,
of development to get that much needed support. It's not, I could never have done it on my own. For a start, billionaire benefactors tend to want to hear from the vice chancellor, not the director of the museum.
yep,
In a university context. So, they wanted to be assured and hear it from the vice chancellor's mouth that this is a significant project and needed
yes,
project for the university.
yep,
So that all had to be pre-socialized as well within the university to get to that stage of actually having a hard chat with a benefactor.
yep. I'll tell you what, with the amount of socialisation you had to do over 15 years, I'm amazed it was only 15 years. But,
well, of
I think
course, the
it's,
global financial crisis came along just as we thought we
that's
were.
right.
We're getting, in 2008 or whatever it was, it was a bit of a disaster for us.
Yep.
And we had to take a deep breath and then, start again. But it worked.
Yep. I think the other the thing that it signifies too, the fact that here we have a major new cultural development at a Sydney university, funded both from external sources and internally. It's kind of saying that that there is kind of faith in the fact that yes, collections and objects do have a fundamental place in the business of a university. And, I think that by contributing money to it, people are sort of backing that idea that there's a lot of good work that can be done by using collections and museums in higher education. And I know that in Australia, we've previously used the term Cinderella collections before in talking about university museums and collections. And I know it's not one of your favourite terms at all, David, but I think that what's been achieved here at University of Sydney actually puts the terminology to rest, because the exact opposite of what was implied in the term Cinderella collections has been demonstrated to occur here. So you've probably personally managed the achievement of burying the term for good, I think, in the history of Australian university museums and collections.
Good. I never did like that.
I thought you might say that.
I might add that informing the ideas of what shape and form a museum would be, we really learnt from our colleagues overseas, asking other directors what worked for them, how did they achieve X or Y. I greatly valued the advice of a number of directors in trips overseas about 15 years ago when all this was coming together. Mm-hmm. And especially around the object-based learning, the specialist staff that focused just on object-based learning were critical, as I said, to our getting the business case approved for this new museum.
Yeah, and I think it's one example of perhaps there's a slow realization, at least in some parts of the higher education sector, that great things can be achieved by sort of repurposing a lot of collections. In a way, it sort of becomes the museums and the collections have become part of the third mission of the university, if you like, in terms of engaging with a whole range of different external partners and other organisations as a way of facilitating research and teaching and learning. And it's really good to see museums and collections coming right into that sort of core function of what a university does.
And it not only engages the teaching and research, but we also engage our general population.
Yes.
Both our alumni, but just the general browsing public.
Yep.
be it school age with aspiration to go to university through our school education programs, but just browsing at weekends. I think that's a really important part of it. So we're able to walk that tightrope between research and teaching needs of the university and being an outwardly focused cultural institution.
Mm-hmm. Yep, fantastic. Look, it's a terrific achievement, David, and it's a fabulous museum. I've enjoyed the number of occasions I've had a chance to visit it, and look, we're certainly hoping that perhaps many more of the people listening to this will have a chance to visit the museum in the not too distant future. Of course, because UMAC is hoping, we're looking and planning to have the 2023 UMAC conference at the Chau Chak Wing Museum in Sydney. So a lot of the people listening to this conversation today hopefully will have a chance to experience the whole museum in its spectacular totality. So we look forward to perhaps being able to invite many more people to come to the museum in the next few years.
Indeed, I'm looking forward to welcoming all my colleagues who have been very generous with their advice over the years and showing them results of all of that.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Okay, David. Well, look, thank you very much for your time today. We might wrap up on that sort of cheerful and positive note for the future. And it was great to hear about the project and learn about what's actually the great transformation that's happened at Sydney University. So we'll see you later.
Thanks, Andrew.
Cheerio.
Bye.